This is Francesco Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report. I was reading an interesting article that came out, I'm not sure if it was yesterday or today. I think it was yesterday. And it's by John Whitehead. And he brought up some really interesting points within this article. And it basically touched on individuals that are slowly getting their rights taken away because of inaction. A lot of talk, very little inaction. He talked about stuff like the government, how we lost 1,475 migrant kids over 3 months, and some of them were lost to human traffickers. How there's a lot of rage over that, but there was also a lot of rage, or not as much rage, actually barely any, when Obama lost over 4,000 of them during his watch. They were threatened. They were being just like what's going on now, and it's because of little of inaction and lots of rage, but very little action, that things are not being done. And what he's basically saying is act. There are some lines that you shouldn't cross. The endangerment of kids' lives. Why didn't anybody act then? He brought up several situations like Jeff Sessions on the stop and frisk. How he is for randomly stopping Americans and frisking them without any reasonable suspicion. It's not needed in this case. And how this should concern all of you guys. How instead of complaining, you should contact the Justice Department. They got a number, it's out there, the 202 number, and read them, the Fourth Amendment right, about the right to be of us people to be secured in our houses, papers, effects, against reasonable search and seizures. And I get how a lot of people will say, well, it's helped, it drives down crime. So what, you're going to give up your rights? Again, they know this. They know people are willing to give up their rights for security, and then they take a little bit more and a little bit more, and we just have to go back to what the action that was taken ever since 2011, how much we've lost in rights. He talked about the Transportation Security Administration. He covered how they're basically tone deaf to the Fourth Amendment. He covered how there was a 96-year-old World War II veteran who was in his wheelchair. He was getting a pat down. No part on his body was left untouched. And many people just sat there and seethed and didn't do anything instead of acting. How come nobody got out there? Harness the power of the walls to go out there and urge individuals at Congress to stop this, to file a complaint against the TSA for some of their egregious practices. And this is just a minor one. There's many out there. About the secret watch list to monitor people who may be a threat to an airport or checkpoints. You don't even know if you're on the list, and you don't know how to get off the list. There's recent news out there about Amazon, how they're selling police real-time facial recognition software. They can scan faces from everywhere, identify people, track them, report them to the police. Everybody just shrugs it off. Not a big deal. What do I care? I'm not doing anything wrong. Why not harness our wallets and tell Amazon, stop this? We favor our freedom, the principles of freedom over your profit motives. And this article went on to express how the Chinese are doing this. And, it starts out as a little thing, facial recognition, how neat, my iPhone realizes who I am. But it's what it evolves into. In China, it was interesting. I didn't know this. Schools are even employing facial recognition in their classrooms to alert the teachers if students aren't paying attention. And that probably goes on that whole social networking score. They got a score now out there basically based upon your actions on social media and elsewhere. And if your score reaches a certain parameter, you can't leave the country, you can't do a flight, and you're basically punished depending upon where your score is at. How about when you hear Jeff Sessions out there talking about and bragging about, he's big on this, and I don't know why. Civil asset forfeiture is something that drives me crazy. It's basically a robbing of a person's wealth with no due process. You're not allowed to carry cash. There's many stories out there. I think I've covered this before in rants where you've gotten, let's say, $3,000 on you. You get pulled over, and in no real world scenario should you have any cash over $100 or whatever it is. Let's do a cocaine trace. Well, just about every single form of currency here has some kind of drug on it. They say they keep your money over suspicion. Suspicion of what? You got $3,000. Why? Then you got to go to court. Spend $3,000 just to try to get your money back, and you may not even get that back. Monies, cars, valuables. It was put out there with this war on drugs. Hey, drug dealers doing this, let's take the car. And that's evolved like all this stuff does to us normal citizens. You shouldn't have any cash on hand. Why? If I made it through my business, if I made it working, I declared it on my taxes. Why do I need it in a bank? Why can't I keep cash in hand? Why should I have to put it in the bank? There's so much corruption around that program that countless innocent Americans are being robbed blind. And this money is being filtered into the government. Billions of dollars without any probable cause. The local police departments love it. It's a way for revenue dollars to come in. How about when the schools? Whitehead touched on the schools, and basically how armed Denver police are pulled a gun on a school official and did classroom searches in there for a missing student. Do you really need to pull out a gun to conduct a search in a school for a missing student? When do we say enough is enough? When do we say these type of government-sponsored programs, the systematic violence out there that's being perpetuated against American people and our liberties, has gone too far? When you're out there, we covered this individual. This you hear about this more often than a ton of times. He talked about Andrew Finch. He's in Kansas. He answered his door. Next thing you know, he's being shot in the head and killed 10 seconds later by a police sniper. It was all part of that prank called swatting. Somebody made a phone call. SWAT team went out there. Senseless tragedy, overzealous of SWAT team members. But there's no accountability. How can we not have reform of our police departments if there's no accountability? We see now time and time again where officers do something that they should be either fired or severely reprimanded for, and they're not. And there's no transparency, no accountability. It's sad. These rise of these whole SWAT teams, the militarization of the police, all in this effort with the drug war. Think about the drug wars, brought about asset forfeiture, militarization of the police state. All from that. Accessing DNA. Everybody thought it was great that this individual was caught using the DNA site, genealogical site. But how about the fact that they can take your data and share it? They can use that data, that what you think is protected under a privacy policy, for fingerprints, a generic fingerprint. They can go out there, they can see who you're associated with, they can see who your family members are, they can chart your ancestry, they can do a full-on research into you and your family members. When you hear someone talking about, this just happened, I think, last week, where there was an individual, and he was, it's an American citizen, the individual was in Montana, the Border Patrol overheard the individual speaking Spanish at a gas station. And what they did is arrested the guy. So instead of what we did, instead of acting, people just shook their head in disgust and said, "Oh, those damn Border Patrol agents." But we are a nation of immigrants. My dad immigrated here. I'm a first generation. Our strengths are derived from diversity. We should never be concerned or arresting or harassing an individual just because they speak Italian, Spanish, Russian, whatever it might be, because we have freedoms. They're enshrined in our Bill of Rights, our commandment, our first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And if they're going to mean anything anymore, we have to stand up for them. We have to hold people accountable. We can't sell out our birthright. You know, he said, this whitehead said it perfect. You can't sell out our birthright for empty promises of false security. You can't remain silent in the face of ugliness, pettiness, meanness, brutality, corruption, and injustice. He hit the nail on the head with that. Because they're going to continue to whittle your freedoms away. Every time they enact one of these new policies, these new laws, these new amendments, whatever they're putting out there, they tend to go a step further. And that's why you have a lot of individuals that are concerned about gun control, because you take one, they just keep taking a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And that's because we're not standing strong for our freedoms, and we need to stand strong for our freedoms. We need to give a voice to the, like Whitehead said, a voice to the moral outrage that's out there. Do something, anything out there, but stand up and act. Just don't sit behind your little Facebook, Twitter, keyboard and bitch and say, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. Stand up and take action. And I can tell you that's a huge problem. Many times, I can tell you I have a huge base. And I know that most of the people on there are talkers and not doers. And it's sad. And that's what's tearing up the fabric of our society. What say you guys? This has been Francesco Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report.